Welcome again to our round table. This is number 17 in our exploration of the world of writing and publishing, particularly of a criminous nature. I'm Carl Brookins, one of your hosts. With me in the studio are my co-hosts, Ellen Hart, author of the Jane Lawless series, and that stalwart fellow, William Kent Kruger, author of the Cork O'Connor series. A little later, we'll welcome Connie Hill, senior editor at Midnight Inc., a criminous imprint of Llewellyn Publishing here in Minnesota. Have you ever wondered about mystery fiction in general, its background, its roots, or its anchors? We brought some lists of books we think any serious student of mystery writing ought to be familiar with. You want to start us off with a title there, Ellen?
Sure. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. I used to always make my classes read that one because I think it's a tour de force. And I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to ruin anything.
Yes, that's one of the problems of discussing the book.
But it's a wonderful traditional mystery. One of the first.
Not a cozy, but a traditional mystery.
Well, I don't know. Yes, it's
okay. We should discuss that sometime.
Yes, we should.
Oh, well, maybe we will. Make a note. Have our secretary, one of our legion of secretaries, make a note. Mr. Kruger, how about you?
I'm going to give my suggestions in chronological order, beginning with the earliest of the publications, a book called Farewell, My Lovely by Raymond Chandler. I could just as easily have chosen The Big Sleep or any of the Philip Marlowe books. And I chose this one because I think these are the novels that defined American noir. They gave us the mean streets. They gave us the lone wolf protagonist, following his own credo of justice. And it's the foundation on which so much of what many of us do still in the genre.
Certainly in this country. I chose The Woman in White, which is the first true suspense novel or thriller. It's not really a thriller, but it's the first true suspense novel ever written, 1841, by Wilkie Collins. It's a huge novel because it was originally written as a serial. And so if you keep that serialized by Charles Dickens, as it happens, if you keep that in mind when you look at the book, and you pick up the book and it's 750 pages or something like that, some incredible number of words, but it is an incredible look at the life and times of a man who meets a woman by chance at midnight on a street in London and falls in love with her and follows her through an entire lifetime, pretty much, of events. And the suspense as it builds up, as you put it, Ellen, the careful distribution of knowledge and information in bits and pieces. It's just a wonderful piece of that. And you skip the recaps at the beginning of each chapter, which are still there, and were put there because it was a serial. So you get a book that's not much longer than the books that you write.
I've never read it.
Another book.
Well, for me, it's always going to be a Lehane novel, and I could have picked any one of them, but I picked Mystic River, which is his...
when you say Lehane, which Lehane?
Dennis Lehane. Yes, I'm sorry. I know there's more than one. Dennis Lehane, I think, is certainly one of the more popular... I don't know if you call them noir, but they're very dark novels. They're contemporary, they're urban. And Mystic River is a standalone that he did. It's not part of his series, and it's been made into a movie, so many people are familiar with it. But the movie was well done, but the book, I think, is just a terrific novel.
But don't you think the book shows a lot of what made the detective series that came before it such a real valuable and interesting series?
And I think it's interesting that nobody at his press wanted him to write that book. They wanted him to continue on with the same thing,
well, it was well known,
and he didn't want to. So yeah, it's certainly I hate to call anything that new a classic, but I think it will be a classic.
Okay.
Second book I'm going to offer is a book that many people don't think of as a genre novel, but when I teach it as a genre novel, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Why do I think of it as a genre novel? It involves a crime with racial overtones. It involves a very noble protagonist in pursuit of answers, truth, justice. It has the most compelling narrative voice, I think, in American literature, and prose so lovely that it puts most books to shame. What more could you want as a reader?
I've heard that book as talked about as an almost perfect book.
You know, that's the way I think of it, certainly. And I think what it shows is that a great crime novel can be a great novel, period.
Sure, there are. I read a really interesting book not too long ago, which was not one I called The Dangerous Pegasus, which was written by a man whose name I unfortunately cannot remember right now, but I'll look it up for you all. But it's a 1945 book that completely slipped off the radar. The book that I chose for this particular segment, the other one was not a particular book, but an author named Leslie Charteris, who wrote The Saint novels, because that was The Saint is basically a Robin Hood, and a very urbane. Without Leslie Charteris and The Saint, for example, you couldn't have Robin Hood. I mean, you couldn't have Batman. You see.
Okay.
I think that he led to a lot of the characteristics that you find in good detective novels today, which is a man who's living to his own moral code, and it's a very high moral code, and is working to right wrongs that he sees in people that happen to people that authority cannot really handle.
Okay, my third, I guess, would be A Taste for Death by P.D. James. P.D. James, to me, is one of the best British novelists, mystery novelists. I think she is. There are some people that say that there were two P.D. James, that her earlier books were very, very different than her later books. And I think to some extent that's true. A Taste for Book would be one of the later books, and I chose it because it was the first book of hers I read. And I really still think it's one of her best. So wonderful characters, wonderful.
Good writer.
Dark,
complex.
Another great novelist, period.
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly.
My third one is The Blessing Way by Tony Hillerman.
Sure.
It's the first in his Joe Lee Porn Jim Cheese series. And I chose this one because what Hillerman does is gives the reader a protagonist who's not white. It comes from a different culture, although it's within the United States. And I think it demonstrated that readers were hungry for that kind of exposure to another culture, a different kind of a hero, and the fact that he has just an incredible sense of place in his novels certainly has never hurt any of them.
I'm going to cheat a little bit now because I can. Because I can. That's right. A brilliant satirist, Richard Prather, wrote in the late 40s, early 50s. His books are Shel Scott books. They're just really incredible. And if you can only find one, they're mostly not available except in used bookstores. Stripped for Murder. I mean, his books are, for me, laugh out loud books, even though they're detective stories. But the other book, the book that I really want to talk about a little bit more, is called Pavel and I. It's a brand new book, and the thing that sets it aside and makes it, I think, important is that the protagonist, who is a torture master, is the slimiest, the worst kind of a guy you could possibly ask for. And there are very few successful books that use somebody that you absolutely would never want to have dinner with. I mean, this guy, Llewellyn, is the I, and in the book is Pavel and I by a man named Dave Valletta, and it came out in 2008. It's a really fine book.
Interesting.
But
I've never read it.
the guy makes you shudder. He's really, really bad. Well, so.
Can we?
Now
we done?
Can't. Now we're done.
Oh, we're done.
That was only three.
That was only, I know there
Oh.
are thousands of books, but what can I tell you? Now we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with our guest, Midnight Ink senior editor, Connie Hill. Stay with us.